G. Michael, a 36-year-old German doctor. He served as the head of a missionary organization that had arrived in Somalia from West Germany prior to the fall of the Berlin Wall. Since the mission was ostensibly established for operational work, it was necessarily designated as their national project for the combat of blinding diseases. Michael was a distinguished expert in his field, so much so that he had already been placed in charge of the nursing staff, and thus he was unsurprised by the news of his appointment as the mission's director, a role he assumed in addition to managing the project itself. The mission commenced its operations in mid-1978, guided by a strategic roadmap for Christian proselytization across the Horn of Africa, all conducted under the banner of combating blinding diseases. Michel recounts, "My happiness in Somalia, and among the Somali people, was immense. Perhaps this was due to the warmth of their welcome. Perhaps it stemmed from our awareness of the profound poverty they endured, even while maintaining a sense of self-dignity as if they were among the wealthiest of the wealthy. Or perhaps it was due to their kind faces, faces that, despite their dark complexion, could effortlessly convey every nuance of expression or gesture. Many factors lay behind the joy I felt regarding the location of this mission. It seems that, amidst the whirlwind of my work, my joy, and my deep respect for the Somali people, I had forgotten my original mission, the very purpose for which both I and the team had come. With remarkable speed, I acquired Muslim friends, people who inquired after me just as I inquired after them. I devoted myself wholeheartedly to combating blindness, personally overseeing the treatment of dozens of cases. Words of praise and commendation flowed from every mouth whenever I passed through a gathering or walked down any street. I understood their words, even though they were spoken in a language other than my own, for they were the language of the heart. Amidst the whirlwind of all this, and following 5 months of spectacular success in the fight against blindness, a telegram arrived from Germany, sent by the German organization responsible for implementing the project. I said to myself, perhaps this is good news. After all, they ordered me to return immediately, perhaps to thank me for my dedication to the work, or perhaps to present gifts or medals to me and the team members. I could not fathom their peculiar request that I travel to England to attend a new course designed to help me succeed in my mission. My mission was already a complete success, and the work there was proceeding splendidly. What, then, was the point of such a course for a man like me, one who had ranked first in every previous training program? Unable to find an explanation, I could offer no response other than a simple yes. I traveled to England and spent a full month there. Upon returning to West Germany, I eagerly awaited orders to head back to Somalia. A week later, the order arrived: proceed to Tanzania. Once again, I could find no explanation for being sent to Tanzania, despite the success I had achieved in Somalia. Because I did not question them regarding the reason for this, they placed their complete trust in me. 4 weeks later, they sent me a telegram requesting my return to Somalia, and I wept for joy. I returned to Somalia after 5 months of separation from those kind faces and warm hearts. I immediately rejoined the project and resumed my duties and supervisory role. The Somalis' joy at my return was akin to the delight of a patient suffering from an eye ailment who has just been cured. Indeed, were I not afraid of being accused of exaggeration, the overwhelming happiness in their eyes was like a blind man who had suddenly recovered his vision. This is precisely how I felt, particularly for my friend, Mohammed Bahur. He invited me to visit his home, where I received a wonderful welcome from both his family and his neighbors. As I sat with them, I was surprised to encounter a man who spoke English fluently. I was delighted by this, and even more so when I learned that he was Mohammed's father. This was finally the chance I'd been waiting for. The second, and most crucial, phase of my mission in Somalia was about to unfold. Language typically poses a significant barrier to the work of Christianization. However, the presence of a man like this would be of immense help to me in explaining the nuances of the Christian gospel, particularly given that he is a man whom everyone respects and reveres to a degree bordering on awe. I began with this man, whom I had expected to be the key to evangelism and Christian outreach throughout the entire region. I said to myself, let me start by speaking with him about religions in general, and then transition to discussing the gospel and Christ, whom I had realized, time and again, that all Muslims love and acknowledge. Yet, I do not know what happened, nor how this man discovered that my conversation with him would revolve around religion. Before I could even begin speaking, I found him holding a copy of the Quran in his hands as he asked me, "Do you recognize this book?" I smiled but offered no reply, fearing I might provoke him or inadvertently reveal the true nature of my mission. Once again, I sensed that the man could read my mind. He offered me a way out of my predicament and began to speak about the gospel and Christ. He invited me to ask him any question I wished to have answered, whether regarding the gospel or the Quran. "How is that possible?" I asked. He replied, "The Quran holds the answer to any question, or to anything that stirs confusion within you." I did not delve deeply into conversation with him regarding this matter until I was thoroughly prepared to discuss it and, crucially, to ensure that no suspicion would arise on his part. The visit concluded, and I returned first to my work, then to my residence, all the while contemplating how to infiltrate this man's mind and thoughts. For if I were to succeed in that, I would undoubtedly have covered significant ground. Thereafter, picking them off one by one would become a simple task. I returned to some of the brochures and booklets, mocking myself as I felt like a student facing a critical exam. I reassured myself, saying, "It is a simple task. It seems I am blowing it out of proportion." Influencing the thinking of a man like Muhammad's father is an easy matter, certainly an easy one. I then headed off to work. Once I had finished, I began searching for Muhammad Bahur, hoping for the promise of another visit so that I might meet the man who served as the key to reaching my desired objective. The appointment took place, the meeting occurred, and the beginning was abrupt. The moment I sat down, the man asked me about the nature of my profession. "Medicine," I replied. He said to me, "The Holy Quran explains, in great detail, the process of creation and formation, as well as every change that a human being undergoes." "How is that?" I asked. As if he had been waiting for the green light, the man launched into speech, speaking in good English, though that was not the important part. What truly mattered was that he spoke with intense emotion behind every single word that left his lips. I tell you quite frankly that I was astonished, indeed, utterly spellbound, by a book over 1,400 years old that describes the development of the fetus within a woman's womb with such precision and detail as I have just heard. I have studied for many years and undergone rigorous training, and I am well acquainted with the stages of fetal development. Yet, what this man described captivated me profoundly, and, in doing so, it caused me great pain. As usual, I reassured and calmed myself so that I could sleep, and I delegated some of my work tasks to the team. Then, I began to ponder how I might succeed in the second phase of my mission, proselytizing, just as I had succeeded in the first, combating blindness. It is true that I love Somalia and the Somali people, yet I also love my work and I love Christianity, so why shouldn't I draw them toward it to fulfill my primary mission? Once again, I found myself compelled to ask my friend Muhammad Bahur if I could visit him. Yet, before I could even make the request, I was surprised to hear him ask me to visit his father, daily, if possible, explaining that his father wanted to see me and always enjoyed talking with me. At first, I felt delighted, but then I said to myself, how can I rejoice when, even now, I have yet to gain the upper hand? He is always the one to make the first move, so why shouldn't I be the one to launch the attack, or the invasion? I will not recount to you the details of what transpired during the third, fourth, and fifth visits. I found myself completely cornered. I would go to the man fully prepared for a confrontation, yet his conversation, his sincerity and his extraordinary ability to explain and clarify made me appear before him like a schoolboy hearing lessons on religion for the very first time. I was unaware that I had been under surveillance since my very first visit to the home of Muhammad Bahur's father. It appears this surveillance was so meticulous that it eventually led members of the medical team to confront me directly, instructing me not to visit that house or contact that family. The surveillance campaign reached its culmination and was effectively sealed, by a directive issued from West Germany mandating my departure from the camp. Then, just one day before that order was to be carried out, I discovered the existence of yet another directive, one requiring my friend, Mohammed Bahour, to leave his position and relocate elsewhere. No force could have prevented me from cherishing my friendship with Mohammed, his father, and his family, nor from my deep respect for the Somali people as a whole. I stayed in Mogadishu for only a few days. Each night, I would slip out and board a different truck just to reach the home of Mohammed's family. However, this did not last long, for the head of the German team paid a substantial sum to certain local security officials to ensure I was barred from accessing that area. Yet, just as I finally succeeded in winning over other officials, men of genuine piety and professional integrity, the devastating news arrived. Mohammed had been arrested because of his association with me. I wept bitterly for his sake, and I suffered deeply over my inability to see the task through to the end alongside his father. I wanted to reach a conclusion, or, to put it more clearly, a beginning. Either an end to the doubts that had begun to seep into my mind as a result of this man's words, or the start of a new journey. In the meantime, I received another telegram from Germany instructing me to leave Somalia within a few days and travel to Kenya to enjoy a vacation. I used the need to retrieve some personal papers from the campsite as a pretext, informing the security officer of my intention. Immediately upon entering the premises, I headed straight to the home of Mohammed. I found the household filled with extraordinary joy. Mohammed's father remarked to me, "You have arrived just as the month of goodness and blessings dawns." I asked him about this month, and he replied that it was Ramadan. I shared the suhour meal with them, and just before dawn, I watched as the entire community streamed out to attend the prayers. I stayed with them for a full day, and, out of respect for their sentiments, I felt compelled to fast from food and drink for an entire day for the very first time in my life. A few days later, I traveled to Kenya. Upon my arrival at the airport in the capital, Nairobi, I was met by someone who informed me that I would be staying in a large private home rather than a hotel. The warmth of my reception was unmistakable. However, several weeks later, I received news of a far more painful nature. A telegram arrived, stating, "You will not be able to return to Somalia again, for security reasons." In whose interest was this decision? I could find no one to answer my question. I calmed down a little as I recalled the stance taken by Mohammed, along with his father and family, towards me, and as I remembered all the Somali faces I had encountered. Then, I received an urgent message from my father demanding that I return to Germany as quickly as possible. The lines of the message stated, or at least implied, that he had received information warning of the grave danger I would face were I to travel to Somalia. I also discovered that the authorities in West Germany possessed a detailed report concerning me and my every movement. At that moment, I made my decision. I weighed the situation in Germany against what was transpiring in Somalia. The people's eagerness to see me, their profound anxiety, and their ceaseless inquiries about my well-being. And so, I shut myself away behind closed doors and began reviewing the lessons I had learned from Muhammad's father. I prepared a sheet of pristine white paper, fetched a pen, and penned this telegram to my headquarters in West Germany. Rest completely assured, everything is in order. I'm going to embrace Islam. I deposited my message into the mailbox, thereby bringing to an end a journey fraught with anxiety and tension. As I made my way to the mailbox, I felt like a groom on his wedding day. I then turned to my friends in Nairobi and declared, I have resolved to return to Somalia, whatever the cost may be. I will go back, even if the price I must pay is my very life. It came as no surprise that I possessed absolutely nothing with which to carry out my decision to return. I proceeded to sell off all my belongings and clothing, saving only the clothes on my back and 3 pairs of shoes I had brought with me, and thus managed to raise the fare for my journey toward faith. Yes, I had arrived in Mogadishu, and from there, I proceeded to the home of my mentor, Bahur. The moment he embraced me, I whispered, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. I had no time for celebration. Instead, I devoted myself to study and to the diligent memorization of the Holy Quran and the noble Hadiths. The Somali people held me in high esteem, and, since the local officials were an integral part of the fabric of this society, they succeeded in securing a decree that granted me full freedom of movement, allowing me to live and integrate with the Somalis at any time and in any place, as a true brother and fellow Muslim bearing the new name, Abdul Jabbar. Only then did I reflect upon the project we had been implementing. By the grace of Allah, the project had ground to a halt, having failed to achieve its objectives in either its first or second phase, specifically, the phase dedicated to proselytization. However, it had achieved resounding success in the phase dedicated to treating the blind. My reward from God has been made complete by the approval of Dr. Abdullah Nassif, Secretary General of the Muslim World League in Mecca, for me to continue working on this project in its new form, a form of benevolence and work undertaken purely for the sake of God. And so, here I return.